We've got absolutely nothing to talk about and nothing to show you other than pretty screenshots. But here we are anyway. Oh dear. So, as we kind of discussed just a minute before we put the stream up, we're going to have a little bit of a chat about DDO, and we welcome people in chat to join in as well. So there's been quite a few updates going on, with the last few patches we've had, and a lot of discussion about warlocks in particular. So we're going to have a little sort of look through and discuss, okay? No panicking. This is entirely impromptu. None of this is planned.
Yeah, well, no panicking away.
And Titan wants Lemania up. It's hardly a surprise. Everybody likes Lemania.
I think it's I think it's coming up this week. I think Jerry said so last Monday.
Yeah.
So obviously, everyone's been talking about Temple of Elemental Evil an awful lot, so I don't really want to go over that too much. I mean, we all pretty much know what's going on there by this point. We might brush over it later, and obviously there's the Rogue Enhancement Pass, which we discussed the last time we couldn't do a stream because the servers were down. Also, we've discussed the Rogue at great length. But in that same, so in the initial update 25, there were a couple of other sort of noteworthy changes. In particular, coupled with the Rogue Pass, was the changes to crossbows. Now I have level 17 arty that uses crossbows all the time, and I have to say it's a noticeable change in attack speed. However, I have noticed a few sort of weird little things, like if you change from not a crossbow into a crossbow, it fires a bolt just randomly, and you overfire by one shot. I mean, it's easy enough to compensate for that once you know what you're doing, but it's just a little bit of an odd thing. And overfiring by one shot doesn't seem like a huge problem, but then you think about if you're trying to sort of snipe a particular thing and not pull aggro from the other side of the room, you have auto-targeting on. As soon as you finish shooting that one guy, if it switches auto-target to the other guy and you fire that extra shot, you've attracted the attention of him and all his friends.
See, what I've noticed with crossbows is you've got to relearn or personally I had to relearn how to fire them. Because I always held the mouse button down. In fact, one of our previous builds, I had so many attacks on the crossbow. I used the number keys for the attacks, and I used the mouse button to reload. And now it's basically taken that step out. And what I'm finding is the overshots that are firing, 9 times out of 10, I can account for them as me being too aggressive. Because I'm actually queuing up shots without realising it. Well, obviously I'm realising it because I know it's 9 times out of 10 that's happening. But yeah, I can actually go through and go, no, I was too heavy on that one. I went too much. I queued up an extra shot. And if you're really, really careful and you just tap the mouse button for a lot of your attacks and make sure the character's dead before you tet it again, it wipes out most of that problem.
Then you're left with the human error element of reduced DPS from that, obviously, as a side effect. Yeah, I could see. Yeah, that's interesting. But as a overall, I would say, aside from minor sort of targeting and little things like that, change to crossbows has been great fun. And I've even taken the liberty of equipping a great crossbow on my arty and giving that a whirl, and I wasn't unimpressed. So, so that's good.
I did similar on my character, and there is there is a case for great crossbows being almost equal to heavy repeaters. I believe there is a bug, which I'm not going to mention at the moment, that makes the repeaters more powerful. If that bug was to be fixed, I think they would actually be pretty much on a par. I'm comparing a non-upgraded temple weapon against needle. So a non-upgraded great crossbow from temple against needle.
Excellent. There wasn't. I mean, just looking through update 25. There's nothing really other than that we haven't already covered. So I'll move on. To patch 2. Or are we on patch 1? What happened to patch 1? Just mind the beeping there. Right, okay, so patch 1 was Rogue Mechanic Leg Shot no longer requires level 12. That's interesting. I guess that is just fixed that. Now this is the thing. So we're going to cover Druid and Artificer pets a little bit later. I want to talk about them a little bit when we look at Hirelings. But they lost the ability to be trained briefly, which is amusing. Not that you can really train them particularly effectively anyway, compared to what you can train player characters. And Fred was broken as well, so it seemed an awful lot was broken in update 25 by accident. Obviously that was all fixed a little while ago. Monster Manual. Now, okay, so we have the Monster Manual number 4. What do you people enjoy Monster Manuals? I'm more of the where I know that it's there and I see the deeds pop up every now and again. But then, for the most part, I ignore that they exist until such a time as I'm so inclined to go rummaging through it, pick up maybe some rewards if I've found any, if I've gained any, and have a little look, see what I've got. I don't know, just some people say obsess with killing one of every type, finding all the rares and filling up the book as much as they can. I just kind of ignore it. I mean, it's nice, and I love the fact that we have a monster manual. And the artwork, of course. The troll, original troll artwork is I'm a fan of that, just at random. But I, for the most part, ignore the monster manual until such a time as I spend a while looking through it. Don't really visit it terribly often. But I like that it's there.
Yeah, I am on the same page as Dagda. And I only have, 1 or 2 volumes from the premium thingy, so I don't have the latest one, but it's nice to see up the notification that you've done a deed.
One of the things about the new manual was it air elementals, orcs, and there was another kind of elemental brought in as well?
I know there's fire, earth, and fire, stone, and air, and the elementals.
There was certainly a couple of things, and I noticed because I spent a lot of time running around in Tui that orcs and air elementals and another type just built up and built up and built up very, very quickly. In fact, one of them, I think, gave a pet. And may have been fire elementals was in before.
Yeah.
And yeah,
fire elementals and methods were in before, I think.
Yeah. I now have the fire elemental pet just from running Temple of Elemental Evil.
Everybody loves the pet. Now, the one thing that was mentioned was the idea that when any further releases of the Monster Manual won't contain astral shards as a reward, which begs the question of what will be there instead, if anything. I assume there will be something, otherwise they wouldn't have bothered to mention it. But it's a little teaser there, I guess.
The first couple of volumes only gave turbine points, remember?
Maybe it'll go back to that then. Maybe they're just not interested in handing out free money in one way, but they're like handing out free money in a different way. I don't know if it was ever really worth it. I mean, they come in like one astral shard or whatever it is, but I don't know.
Ones and threes for the top tiers.
So we did gloss over Temple of Elemental Evil, but Zergotmoi is perhaps quite notable, because Zergotmoi feels, when you fight it, I don't know, it or her, feels a lot more like a typical MMO boss, in that you have to be, there are mechanics that you have to work around. There's your typical thing is like, there's big red marks on the floor, don't stand in the big red marks because that's where you'll die. It's not quite as straightforward as that, but it feels a lot more like there are very specific mechanics that you have to follow in order to be able to do it. There are a lot of that break you out of just basically attacking and moving, and doing what you would have to do generally as a class anyway, as an extra layer of something else to do. On the other hand, a lot of the bosses that we already have don't follow that pattern. There are strategies and things to dealing with the individual people. Take Harry as an example. Essentially, all you have to do is kill him. But you've got, like in part 4 of Shroud, you've got the gaps where he runs off and does something else. You've got the gnolls that leash themselves onto him that casters have to deal with. The healers have to keep everyone alive and clear the poison off of the people who are fighting in the middle, and there's the blades. So there's lots of mechanics going on, but at the end of the day, people just have to smack Harry in the face. With Zergotmoi, it's a lot more of you sort of red zones on the floor where you can't stand, perpetual damage that you can't avoid, no matter where you stand. This whole thing about standing still in MMOs, you don't stand still in DDO, but they've made it so that you have to think about this constant incoming damage that healers have to deal with and you have to deal with. It's a different way of doing it, and I mean, there's other sort of interesting mechanics, and I was wondering how you rate this particular boss in amongst other bosses, and how the way it behaves, whether it's a good thing that it's behaving that particular way, or how it compares with other things. Any thoughts? Any thoughts? Not a thought.
I haven't met her yet.
No.
Okay.
I won't tell
Right.
you. Spoilers everywhere.
Oh, it's okay. I can do with spoilers. I don't have any thoughts on it because I haven't been there yet.
The main thing I'd say on it is it actually forces you to just not be a beatdown. You actually got to pay attention to what's going on around, and maybe even have some communication going in a group for a change. If you look at the very first, well, I say the second raid in the game technically, Vela, there's danger spots there. They're just not marked.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference.
You'll look at something like the Abbot as well, and you get to. I've never actually done the Abbot, but was there not a bit about standing on the ice and protecting yourself from the fire coming down?
Yeah.
So
there's lots of mechanics, but it's not your typical. At this particular moment in time, you can't stand in this place. It's
yes.
And this place is
In the
marked
Abbot,
by a
you've got to
shiny
stand
red.
in a particular place.
Yeah, but it's not marked. It's marked by an effect, by a by an environmental change, not just by here's a shockwave, don't stand in the middle of it, kind of effect on the floor that's not really representative of anything other than here's a place that you can't stand.
Yeah, but in both raids, you've got to go to a certain position and stand, and that's the only place you're going to be safe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Scotty's a little more Aberdeen. I'm further south than him.
Oh dear. It's because it's the only Scottish accent they've ever heard other than yours.
Hi, Captain.
There's
Oh
Klingons
my
on the
God,
starboard
wait.
bow, starboard bow,
No, you didn't just say that. Carry on.
Have you got any more lines?
But, just responding to Confucius there in the chat, making comparisons with a raid because the devs specifically said that this end encounter in Temple of Elemental Evil was more like a raid boss. So it is designed to be more that sort of style. Almost like Steel of the Souls was kind of a raid boss in its time, but it was still a 6-man group.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it does have that kind of feel about it. So that's why I'm comparing it to something more like that. But yeah, my main thing on it would be it actually makes you pay attention, and it's not just a beat down on the boss.
Yeah, a lot more. But that Confucius obviously makes a good point in that it's fairly unique among what we could class as a quest to have that kind of mechanic. But I think it's fitting that it would be Temple of Elemental Evil, and other examples being something like Stealer of Souls, because these are big events at the end of a long piece of hard work, the big end moment, and it's fitting that they would be something more than just your typical and here's the red-named troglodyte that you have come here to kill at the end of the sewer kind of moment. So yes. Excellent. And yes, good. Confucius is saying in Steel of Souls you don't have to kill the boss. You don't have to, but you really should. It's good for your soul. The same is true of there are many secret little mechanics and things that for various quests where there are things you don't have to kill. It's what discrete bonuses are for. But you know, probably ought to kill things if that's the way that you're inclined. I mean, the same is like we've got Tor as well. Tor is a big example of you complete the quest before you get to the interesting part. And the other one being the one in what's it called? The one in the 12 with the 2 dragons. I've forgotten its name. Whatever, it's not important. So okay. Those twinkle notes. Right. Patch 2. That was the next little thing. So this was the one where they modified champions, their remnant drops, and the chests. I've noticed certainly that the amount of chests I've been getting has vastly dropped. But the remnants, I would have to say, have remained reasonably consistent. So I think overall, decent work there. How does everyone feel about the chests that they're not getting?
Chess? I haven't seen chess in weeks. All I see is green, no, gold cookies on the floor, but chess not so
You're not
much.
getting some. I mean, I've still had a couple, but certainly vastly fewer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I notice I'm getting less chests, and even with the double remnants, I'm getting less remnants than I was before. I was making good progress and actually banking some remnants for future augments and such like, and now it's slowed back to a crawl again. I think the drop rate has gone a little too far the other direction.
Okay. I mean, you're probably, given that I reckon you're the person who plays the most on a weekly basis out of the three of us, or four if Queen is listening. I guess you'd be in the best position to know how the overall feel has been. Excellent. I made sneak attack more powerful. I mean, that's always welcome. Everybody likes to stab things in the back. And then there were some slight changes to enhancements, and slight changes to the monster manual, and the +7 upgrade tomes work correctly. But I mean, who has those? But now here's a question. Actually, I don't know who mentioned this to me. I don't even know if it was in part of someone else's podcast or something. But there's an argument because we got up to +7 tomes now. At what point do tomes cease to really benefit you? Because a big thing about tomes, of course, is that the inherent bonus counts towards your base, so you can use the fact that you have a tome to sneak in feats and enhancements that you otherwise wouldn't be eligible for. And aside from the basic stat bonuses that you get from having a tome of a higher number, at what point do you get to a point where investing so much money and time and effort into getting that shiny tome is no longer really worth it? There's no feat that could possibly require you to have a +8 tome, for example. And provided you've built a character. And it's all very subjective, this discussion, because it's all based around what you base stats were, what class you're doing, what feat it is, and who knows what reason it is that you're using. But do you get to a point where having a better tome is pointless? That's my question.
Very good question. I don't think I can help you with answering that. Sorry.
I don't know if there is an answer. It was just.
I'd say, from a feat perspective, you're probably looking at +4s, because if you're looking at a feat that requires something like 21 dex or something like that, then you're going to get that at what, 3, 7, 11, 15.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're going to want those feats as early as you can get. +6s are what, level 23? So at an outside bet, a level 24 feat, you might take something. But if you're using a +6 tome to actually get, say, 23, then you probably started with 17. So why did you start with 17 if you weren't planning on investing it in the first place? If you're going to start that high, it's probably going to be one of your main stats. So I'd probably say +4s.
Yeah, I mean, I usually aim for +4s on my characters if I'm investing in them that heavily to want to have tomes, if they're going to be multi-life or if I'm actually aiming for something in particular. I always, no matter the toon, try to get at least a +2 int, just for the extra skill points. I mean, generally speaking, I go for. But +4 is I hardly ever go above +4. I've never had a reason to, particularly. So yeah, I would agree. And oh dear. Right then. So what else were we talking about? Okay, so Hirelings. Now, here's a topic of contention. As Jerry will quite likely pipe in and say, "Oh, yeah, hirelings. Everybody loves hirelings." I
Oh,
personally,
he tested it. He
yeah,
tested it with Patrick from the DDO cast.
I personally try to avoid using hirelings as often as possible. There are moments where I would be on my own, for example, and would want to run a quest that requires more than one person, and I would use a hireling. But as a rule, I try not to use them. I'm aware an awful lot of people like to run with a cleric behind them, keeping them alive. There's situational uses for a lot of things. Melee hireling, a very early level, is very handy. There are hirelings that can do sneaky little extra things. That I mean, it's always handy to have like haste or things like that as from a wizard, especially if you're a warforged, for example. We've got some guy that can cast haste and reconstruct what sounds great, right? But the hirelings AI has always been a little bit tricky, and I mean, that's not something anyone can actually do anything about. It's all AI. There's always going to be issues. It's an AI that you can control. I mean, that's a very high, and especially since they start fiddling with it, they give you even more control, and it's all a good idea. There's always issues, and one of the things that doesn't get talked about an awful lot with hirelings as well is that we have druid, artificer, and wizards all have a pet of some description that behaves like a hireling. And that has its own AI, but they can do even more than a hireling can. They have enhancements and have other things that you can customize into them. They have unique behaviors like smasher of boxes and things like that make them even more difficult to control. Even more things can go wrong. And also, we're well aware that these pets are largely neglected. Like, I mean, their enhancements haven't been done. We know they're not viable at end game. I mean, most hirelings aren't either, but we know that they're hirelings that can do things at epic levels.
Wait a second, but mostly they're stupid, and that's my biggest problem.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be that element of stupidity, like the trap moment. But the things that I've noticed recently that are really, really annoying for me personally, particularly for like my artificer pet, which is the only hireling, quote unquote, that I use regularly, is where you set it to stand still and it runs off anyway.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And that is my nemesis. So many times that dog has died because I told it, "You stand still," and it runs off. Because it's got a 30 feet operational radius or whatever within its stand still command. So I've set it to it's set to stand still, and there's an acid trap or something in front of me. There's a guy on the other end of the acid trap that fires a bolt at me, and suddenly the dog runs off and dies in the acid trap. I mean, there's certain elements of proper control, but I swear there's the 30 feet radius half the time doesn't apply. The interesting thing with the 30 foot radius actually is multiple levels, and I found this in challenges quite a lot. Is that the dog will run much further than its 30 foot radius as it walks, but not an actual distance, because it's running all the way down a set of stairs, or running down a level or up a level. So you're in lava caves or something, and you're miles away from the hireling that you put next to the foreman to look after the foreman. But you get hit by something, and the hireling runs all the merry way down to you and leaves the centre completely ignored, because it's still technically within its 30 foot radius at the point of contact. Because of the vertical component, which is something personally that I've noticed. I don't know if I'm necessarily describing exactly how it's working, but that's something I feel like I've encountered. Has anyone have any hiling stories? I don't know if any of you actually use hilings at all.
I rage quit using hirelings because they're dumb. No story.
Yeah, but they're supposed to be dumb. They can't think for themselves. You have to do the thinking for them.
I mean, at the end of the day, them being dumb is partially an incentive for you to get real people to play with.
Well, okay, when I say that, it's what you were discussing before, where you tell them to do something and they just won't. Or they'll run off and it makes no sense for them to do that. That kind of thing. It really kind of comes to my style, you know?
Chombra, I think, makes an interesting point, saying that hilings are not reliable. There is sort of the thing where you have a hiling that forgets what its goal in life is. This happens a lot with my Arctic dog, actually. I mean, obviously that's the one I have the most experience with because it's the one I use the most. But a dog where it ceases to respond to commands, or it starts floating in midair, or it still responds to commands, but when it actually goes to attack something, it just stands next to it and doesn't do anything.
Yes, all of those things.
There was an interesting one that Sin pointed out to me. I believe this one has been fixed though. Where if at any point you asked the dog to follow you, like you pressed the follow command, this was when they implemented the teleportation. So no matter where it is, if you press follow, it will teleport to you. And as soon as that teleport had been enacted, all commands like follow commands and things like that ceased to have any effect. It would just carry on its merry way.
Yeah, it takes something like 5 seconds for any of the commands to take effect again.
Yes, and that's true. The cooldown there, though, there is a cooldown there, isn't there? I mean, if you wanted a quick...
A cooldown shows up on things like Intimidate and Trip, but it doesn't show up on other things like Stand Still.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at one particular bit of the bar, you can actually miss that get things on cooldown anyway and just click it automatically.
I mean, there is Confucius saying that you don't want to pay attention to the hiling, and paying attention to the hiling is ultimately what gets you killed, because the hiling isn't doing what you thought it was going to do, and you have to give it some commands. I mean, the argument is you should just treat it like an extra hotbar and cycle it into what you're doing, but obviously in the heat of the moment you're expecting that character to do something and it has failed to do it, and now you're compensating, and that's how you can lose concentration, especially in a high stress situation like with Zergotmoy, as I assume he points out.
When something like the shockwave comes in, trying to get the hireling to actually stand in that particular safe spot it's almost impossible.
It's a very good point. And I suppose that's another difference. That's another point for the treating of the way we're treating Zergotmoy like a raid boss and raid-like mechanics in what is essentially a quest. So you can use hirelings, race cakes, things like that. Yeah. So interesting discussion.
I mostly use the cleric hires, and I use them as free shrines. Give me mana back.
We use you as a free shrine, Mary. That's what your job is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, but I get it out of SP as well. Even on my favorite soul, on my cleric, I don't need them for the healing. I just want them to give me mana when I need it.
My personal favourite use for hirelings is soloing Crucible.
Cannon fodder. That's my favorite.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, if you want to feed a defenseless individual to somebody, fine. It's a great way of doing it.
Distraction, just
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. And you could just like summon a celestial dog and have it banished back to its plane, but no, she brings a hireling to have them brutally murdered over and over again.
Hey, payback.
It's interesting how we still use the cleric hirelings for their DVs, but it's very rare nowadays to convince a cleric to cast DV on you, because their turns are far more valuable elsewhere for bursts and auras and things. Personally, I build my clerics to have as many turns as physically possible, so I can be quite versatile with what the situation demands. I love the little extra things that cleric can do with turns, but a lot of people just go straight in for the healing auras and things. I wouldn't necessarily underrate the other buttons that you could press. Patch 3 was essentially nondescript. It was just a mix up to daily dice and changes to the XP and things for Temple of Elemental Evil, so I think we can ignore that. Good.
Talking about the daily dice change, has anyone seen the new, what was it, companions that you can earn in the daily dice?
I haven't had one or seen anyone else who had one.
So no one got it yet? Bang.
Well, I've got some of the plus 10 spell power pots, but that's been the only new thing I've seen.
Good. I'm just going to scroll through chat just to see if we've missed anything interesting. No? Everybody's just having a hearty.
Yeah, someone is trying to get us all out of the chat room by saying that the servers are back up. They are not back up! It's a trap!
Telling lies.
Yes.
Okay, so that's basically everything that there's been relating to Update 25 and its associated patches. So the other big topic at present is the big awaiting Lemania and all this talk about warlocks. Now, I personally am not an expert on warlocks. I know Sin isn't either. I don't know if Queen has any experience with warlocks. Mary, are you a warlock fan at all?
I have no idea at all. I'm totally blank.
So,
with druids.
Yeah.
I was totally blank at druids, and I love druids, so I'm totally blank in warlock,
Yeah,
and I hope I love those as well.
So it's a bit of an exploratory project, I guess. Waiting
I
for.
have experience with warlocks.
You do?
Thanks for skipping me, damn it.
Oh, sorry. Well. Want to talk for 5 minutes so I can have a break?
The floor is yours, Queen.
Alright, well, to be fair, I don't really know what's in store for the DDO ones, because I haven't really looked up much. However, my experiences with warlocks are limited to Neverwinter Nights and Neverwinter, the online MMO. Again, don't know how it's going to compare to DDO. Probably be totally different. The ones in Neverwinter, specifically, you can spec it to be just all-out DPS or more kind of healing-oriented. I went for the all-out DPS, and for a while we were, Flippy and I were featuring like dungeon duos with just those two different specs. Worked out great. As far as how it's going to work in DDO, again, not sure, but really looking forward to trying. As far as like how it worked in Neverwinter Nights, I know that you could fashion the Eldritch energy into either melee power or ranged, or both, which I found kind of versatile too. Whatever situation, I could spec it for like fire, or just straight up regular damage for the Eldritch Bolt or whatever. And again, I don't know how it's going to work here, so if y'all in chat want to enlighten me, awesome.
Yeah. My understanding of warlocks is based primarily, given that I've never really played one or played around with one, is just how they sit in the lore. And I mean, I don't know a great deal about specifics of Eberron, but the main thing, of course, is that the root of their power is their blood, right? It is invested in them somehow, and there's a couple of different ways that can happen. There's the sort of idea that it is literally just bloodborne, passed down from some powerful source, be that fiendish, be that dragon. I mean, there's the whole sort of the way that's basically the way that the sorcerer works, is the root from a dragon, or at least that's one of the indicated possibilities. The other way that you can get it, aside from blood, is through making a pact, trading your soul or some element with a powerful being, powerful extraplanar being, be that demon, devil. Although I guess there's not a lot. I mean, I don't know if necessarily which of the demons or the devils would be more inclined to be the one making the pact, and the other one would just decide to eat you, depending on the chaotic nature. But
it's been mentioned pacts will be, or are scripted at the moment as Fey, Fiend, and Great Old One.
Oh, interesting. Fey actually is really interesting, because obviously, fairy stuff is something that's obviously, it's a whole plane that we have not really interacted with, aside from a few enhancements in Epic Destiny moments that mention it. But it's not really something that we've really touched in great detail, compared to some of the other planes that we've dealt with extensively. As one of the things I was saying, the making of the pact with devil, demon, but there's the alternative to that is making a pact with a celestial, and making it with a good deity, or a good, not deity, but a good outsider. So you don't necessarily have to be of an evil alignment, or your pact doesn't necessarily have to be made with someone of an evil alignment. It could be made with someone of a good alignment. The idea that it doesn't necessarily have to be based around somebody who's evil, because there's an awful lot of stuff with like, well, does this mean that we're going to get evil alignments? Well, no, not necessarily. However, with you having mentioned that you can make a pact with a fiend, that aligns itself with the idea of an evil alignment, but not. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. They could do it with the alignment step thing, like you do with deities, where you have to be one step away. You have to be one step away from. You can't be more than one step away from the alignment of the person you're making a pact with. So if you are making a pact with someone who is lawful evil, you would have to be lawful neutral.
Chaotic.
Tentatively, what they're doing is they're making the pacts feats that you take at level 1 Warlock, and certain things like Fiend will I'm just reading from the notes here. Technically, a pact with a Fiend will require that you are not good, and a pact with a Great Old One will require that you are not lawful. But there are some technical things they need to look into to see how it's all going to work.
Mm-hmm. I could see it being a little bit of a tricky thing to straighten out. But once it's straightened out, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how the law will be implemented in a very PvE, very good versus evil kind of game.
The only thing I can think of for the good alignment side, there is a series of, it's not Eberron, but it's Forgotten Realms novels, written by Erin Evans, where there's a tiefling warlock, and that character is definitely not evil, and they have a pact with the fiend.
Yeah.
So there is precedent there for, good.
Yeah.
May not
Yeah.
like
I'm
it. It's
also.
precedent there.
Yeah. I've also now opened up the notes so I can just have a little sneak through. What do you think of the spells as they stand? Any comments? I see them. They look very very arcane.
Like.
Yeah.
Yes, that's my thought as well.
Nothing particularly neat looking. I mean, now this is interesting because a lot of the way that spells are described in the lore for someone who's as visceral and as um, um, just based on their own personal abilities in the lore of a warlock. A lot of their spells, although they do the same thing as a well-defined arcane spell, they have a different name or a slightly different variation, or they draw on something slightly different to produce a slightly different effect, but ultimately they're the same thing.
They're invocations rather than spells.
Yes, exactly. Their invocations are different, but they ultimately cause the same effect. So all of these spells are decidedly very average, as Javor literally just said. It would be interesting to see if they were if they were introduced as invocations in some slightly different capacity to what we're used to, or if they're just going to include them as a basic set of arcane spells, and all the interesting invocations will happen purely in enhancement trees. Because, I mean, the way I picture a warlock is the idea that their Eldritch Blast is a last resort. They're primarily arcane spellcasters and invocators, and they do extra little things. Their actual arcane, their actual Eldritch Blast isn't a primary weapon, but in terms of DDO, it is going to be. It is going to be the basic left-click attack.
Yeah, that's how I read it as well. With my blank knowledge of warlocks, that's how I read it on the post. They use the arcane spells for buffing, maybe some deep buffing, but the Eldritch Blast will be the big bangs.
So it's interesting. Different ways of interpreting it, different ways of implementing it. Different ways of looking at things on that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to visualize the Eldritch Blasting, and as Queen, I have also played Neverwinter Online, and I know that those characters there, they move their hands forward and blast things out of their hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering how the casting will look like in DDO.
I wonder if they would necessarily model it on that kind of thing, or if it's always interesting when they repurpose effects, put them in a slightly different color and call it new. It's like we mentioned Zergotmai. I think it was mentioned in one of Patrick's DDOcast podcasts where Zergotmai's rings are also present in when you're fighting Loth. They're just a different color. They didn't know what to do. So I hope they're unique. I mean, I don't know. In Neverwinter, is it expressed as sort of a fire or something else? Well, Queen's not paying attention.
Queen's getting coffee.
Okay, I wasn't paying. That's me not paying attention. Okay, no worries. Yeah, I've had seen comment. I'm just literally just scrolling through the forums, seeing how people were saying how things like alignment restrictions and not having an alignment restriction would be odd. So much beeping. Let me just have a look at some more posts here. And this is interesting. Haven't nailed down what percentage of spell power will affect Eldritch Blast damage. May also add some epic spell feats. And it's interesting how spell power and things is going to affect the Eldritch Blast. I mean, it's interesting because if you look at different SLAs, there's precedent for treating everything in different ways. I mean, there's the Pale Master SLAs don't even have metamagics. You can't use metamagics on the Pale Master SLAs, whereas pretty much every other SLA in the game does have one. It would appear. Let me check. People are asking whether or not we can get in the game, so I will check. Yep.
Yep, people are confirming it.
Yep, the servers appear to be up, everyone, so very good. Everyone can go play. Thanks very much for everyone who's been listening, but I guess some people are going to run off now and go play, which is fine.
Yeah,
but
they have addictions too.
But we'll be probably carrying on a little bit longer if anybody wants to stay and listen, which I'm sure people will. So yes, are they going to treat it? I mean, am I treating it like a left-click attack? It's not really going to be. Is it going to be subject to metamagics? Is it going to be subject to spell power? Which spell power will it be subject to? Would it be force, fire, untyped?
Force.
Force?
Depends on the pack.
Eldritch
It
Blast
depends on the
is going to
pack.
start at 1d6 force damage, so and increase with levels. I would imagine it's going to be force. Spell multipliers and criticals will also play a part in it, but weapons won't. But you'll still be able to have a weapon in your hand. It's, to be honest, it's something I think we're going to have to see in practice to actually figure out exactly how it's all going to work.
Yeah.
I think even the devs are going to have to look at it from that point of view.
And I guess that brings us on to the question of really balancing it, like where in terms of DPS is that going to have to go, and based on how much spell power you have, what invocations or twisty things you put around your basic, your actual Eldritch Blast, and to make it do special effects. And how crits are going to factor into that, and if they're going to treat it more like a melee attack or more like a spell. And it's a question, I guess, is it going to be melee or ranged? Because it could be both, as Queen rightly pointed out. And yes, Queen, the servers are back. As Queen rightly pointed out, there's no reason why it couldn't be a ranged thing or a melee thing. I personally envisage it more as a ranged thing, but there's no reason why it couldn't be either.
I feel them both to be fun, but like you said, two different games, so I don't know.
I was just in a post by Vagui, but I don't even. How do you even say his name? Varg. I'm gonna call him Varg. Eldritch Blast is fired with your auto attack, left mouse button for most players. No real cooldown except for what we're building into the animation. I wonder if an Arcage. Those of you who've played it, the Mana Stars from Occultism.
Yeah,
Yes.
I remember those.
That's kind of one way of thinking about it, I guess. But perhaps not quite like that. But in terms of how it would feel with an auto attack, I guess. The push it and run.
Yeah.
More like playing an archer, except instead of arrows, you're playing bolts or hurling blasts. blasts of death, or fire, or acid, or Sonic. So yes, they're going for the pew pew feeling.
Aww.
So it's certainly going to be more ranged than close range.
That doesn't surprise me though. Really, it doesn't. That's how most people would build them anyhow.
Mhm.
My
Well, there's going
understanding.
to be a bit of both in there. I think it's going to depend on what pact and what trees you go, because you can set up your Eldritch Blast to basically be an AoE centered
That's
on
true.
you. You can
That's
set it up
true.
as a cone, you can set it up as chain lightning, so
That's the beauty of the Eldritch energy is you can shape it into whatever you would need. And in Neverwinter Nights, you could do that for a blade and smack things with it. Put fire on it, or I can't remember everything, but it
Yeah.
had some nice utility.
It's all
option.
about. It really is something that has the potential to be very versatile. Like in pen and paper, it would play in a very versatile way because you can shape things to your situation. How that's going to feature is this is the thing. This is the problem I have with the druid. Right? It's a very versatile idea. You should be able to change from one situation to another, right? But in practice, people actually build for one thing. Quite often, that's a scary wolf that does lots of DPS and sneak attack damage. Or they build for a cold caster with healing, something like that. So in terms of this, in terms of the warlock, it has the potential to be a very powerful arcane caster that can shape their abilities to a particular situation. But how is it going to actually turn out? Is it going to be that there will be predefined things that will end up being the stock? You know how, like with the cleric, there's 3 trees there, but the majority of people build for aura and go heavily into Radiant Servant and ignore everything else. Or if they pick up other things, they so you build quite often. To be honest, it's a cleric with a Radiant Servant aura and SLAs from the Divine Disciple, and they're a caster cleric. And that's just the build that people have snuck into. Even though the cleric is perfectly viable, investing heavily in the melee option rather than the caster option. So, and I mean, it's going to sparks build versatility. I mean, everyone's going to have their own ideas of what the perfect build is, but you see a lot of caster clerics, for example. You see a lot of bears or cold caster druids. You see, up until recently, you didn't see a lot of mechanics or whatever, or assassins or whatever. I don't pay attention to rogues, but
What? How could you say that?
however,
Oh man, I don't even know you, man.
that's okay.
sacrilege,
No,
heresy.
I know,
well,
right?
I'll build a rogue eventually. A
Got
proper
2
one.
rogues up in your party. I don't care about rogues. Okay then. I have to say though that I can safely say I did not specifically build my druid for anything, but it works.
Well, I mean that's fine. But can you, if at the flip of a coin, can you switch from one thing to another, or does it require a shrine, or does it require an out of quest swap?
Nope.
You know, this is the versatility behind the wizard as well. Is that you can prepare for anything, but if you find that you're not prepared correctly, you require a shrine.
Well, the
To
thing that I
adapt.
generally do with wizards and druids or whatever that can swap spells is I'll put up a good array based on where I think I'm going to be going, and a few just in case. So I'm never caught without anything.
There's something to be said for knowing the game well and having played for a decade, you know, or the best part of one. You know what the quest entails. You know how to prepare for it. You know what choices are going to make you succeed. For someone who's building their very first character as a druid or their very first character as a warlock, I mean, pretty advanced for a very first character, I admit, but not knowing what quest is going to come next,
That's why I said then I put things up just in case.
Yeah. But I mean, it's very interesting. Here's an interesting thing: base attack bonus won't factor into Eldritch Blast attack speed, which renders the question: what base attack bonus will the Warlock have, and why do they have any at all?
3/4.
3/4. Okay. We feel you could realistically argue for Warlock fitting in Arcane, Primal, and maybe even Divine. Our version of Warlock is going to have a more primal feel, separated from Wizards.
There's a later post that says they're leaning towards taking it out of Primal.
Putting more into Arcane. Looking at the spell list, I would certainly say it leans more into Arcane.
I think the main reason was, what have we got in Arcane at the moment? We've got Bard, we've got Sorcerer, we've got Wizard, and we've got Artificer already in Arcane.
Yeah.
So putting Warlock in there would put 5 classes in that starting one.
Yeah.
Which was part of the reason they were leaning more towards Primal.
I mean, Artie realistically should go elsewhere. It needs its own tree, shoving in with the primally type stuff. I mean, it's actually quite difficult to place the Artie, isn't it? Because it's a distinct cross between magic and like arcane magic of its own devising. Really, it's like, by that argument, it is kind of primal magic in that it is not natural. It's not nature magic, but it is unique to the learnings and craft of the Artie, right? It is centered around that element of nature, their ability to manipulate machines and technology and electricity, and that's where their magic sits, and potions and scrolls and UMD, right? That's their magic of an Artie, and then they have a very strong martial, not martial, but the attacking kind of side. Their ability to fire, their ability to use exotic weapons and things like that is a very strong attacking sort of side of things. And I mean, at the moment, in terms of where they sit in Arcane. But many people would put up a strong argument for them sitting in a more martial position, or even to demonstrate the uniqueness of their magic, being more in the primal end of things.
I could not argue for Primal.
I don't mean primal in terms of primal magic, but looking for somewhere special to put them in a category.
Everybody else in the primal sphere is nature based.
Yeah,
You've
that's
got
true.
rangers, you've got druids, you've got barbarians. So it would not make sense to put them in that sphere.
Warlocks,
the one thing I would like to see in the Destinies, and this is completely off topic, I'd like to see more links between the Destiny spheres, because we have Unyielding Sentinel is linked to the Martial sphere. I'd like to see Exalted Angel linked to Draconic, so it links down to the Arcane sphere, and I'd like to see the Magister linked up to the Druid.
Yes, yep, absolutely.
So that you actually had a cross between all the different spheres.
So you can actually
Because right
move
now,
around.
the way it's drawn, it looks like a diamond, but it's actually a Y shape.
Yeah.
And if you connect those up and make a diamond, it would make leveling up Destinies a lot less painful. It'd be a lot easier to actually get between Destinies.
Yeah, and obvious links would make more sense actually with the divine to arcane kind of shift there and things like that.
Yeah.
And arcane to primal.
But you would also actually be able to move around a bit, but you'd still have to do all the same work just to get the fate points.
Yep. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that statement. Absolutely. I 100% support. Devs, I hope everyone's listening. Put lines in that we need to make the graph. We need the graph more Eulerian. Some maths words. It's not entirely true, but it would make sense. Absolutely. So So would perhaps the argument for the arty to be more in a martial and the warlock to be an arcane, something like that? Um, when they put more effort into arty. It's interesting. Oh, there was an interesting question. What is the warlock's past life going to be? I don't know if anybody answered that, but it's a cool question.
I don't think that's been decided yet.
Technical issues with the toughness tree. Everybody was. I don't know what's going on there, but everyone feels lovely about it. The thing with it being force damage is that, as I assume, force damage is going to work in the same way force works everywhere else. In that it has no save to evade, or generally it's just incredibly nasty. But actually, that being said, does that mean if they have shield or night shield, then you're not going to be able to hurt them? um, another thing was question was ranged combat feats and how they factor in, and how meta magics factor in. And I mean, I discussed whether or not meta magics would be a thing when they mentioned spell power, and how, like, for Pale Masters spell SLAs, they don't include meta magics, even though they probably feel like they should, because the SLAs don't really help when you get to high level. And does it beg the question that with a basic attack, how meta magics like Empower and Maximize are they going to make the basic attack? I mean, is this going to feature? Is this going to work on a spell point basis? Are we looking at more of a key bar kind of thing? How would a meta magic factor into that? I mean, I don't mean key, obviously, but how one gauges how much you can use your Eldritch Blast. Like, is the basic attack cost nothing, and fancy invocations cost something? I mean, they cast arcane spells, so they're going to have a blue bar. But how do you treat the SLA? Like, if it's a basic left-click attack, you can't lose a spell point for every time you fire.
Yeah, you mean the blast? Thinking about the mega. You can have a quickened. I don't think you can Eldritch Blast quickened.
No.
So I don't think that the meta magics will work on the Eldritch Blast. It's my feeling, though.
Yeah, because I mean, if they did, I mean, it would be like, make a human warlock, take Empower, Maximize in your very first 2 feats.
Yeah.
Utterly dominate everything for the first few levels. I mean, that's how SLA builds work already, to be honest.
It's true. Bill?
Oh, Turtle woke up.
Hey.
Turtle woke up.
Do we have a game again?
Yes, the DDO's back up now. We're just we're out on stream. We're just talking about warlocks primarily. I'm trying to generate conversation.
I thought it looked like fun. Warlocks. Sorry, I wasn't feeling good.
Huh.
I wasn't feeling good earlier, and I just passed out since it wasn't working.
Oh. I mean, that's basically what everyone in the world does, right? I mean, the DDO's down, everybody go to sleep.
This is a perfect song for that.
Oh, here's an interesting thing. Converting the force damage being used as Bane damage with a tier 3 enhancement. That's interesting. Bane damage is something that we sometimes discuss. I mean, sometimes it seems like a very odd thing, Bane damage. I mean, Bane damage even came up in terms of construct attacks with the rogue enhancements was a virulent discussion. So I don't know how I feel necessarily about that, or how it would work. If it would work against everything, what's the point in it? What's the difference between it just being force damage? Force damage works against everything, pretty much. I mean, what's immune to force damage?
Helmed horrors, and they heal from it sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
It depends. They change their elemental thing while you're fighting them. It's really confusing, but I like it.
I hate them. I hate them with a passion. Not even gonna lie.
That's why. Well, this is why you would do the best way to fight them is like the same way you best way to fight flesh golems, for example, is with untyped damage. So
Just
force.
run away.
I mean, if it's force damage, you're getting a bonus to untyped. I mean, would you? Is the force damage actually going to be untyped? I mean, is that why they suggested bane damage there? Don't know. Bane isn't untyped, but it's different to force, which has issues in some places, obviously. But not in
Bane
most
is
places.
non-resistible.
Yeah. Whereas force is almost non-resistible. Which is the same as untyped. Untyped isn't resistible. The whole point here is how versatile the Eldritch Blast is, and it should be a good representation. It would be interesting if there was a toggle between energy type and shape type. That's interesting.
And I think it also depends on what pack you take, what shapes you can make it look like.
That's what I was trying to say before. About shaping the energies and whatnot. From Neverwinter Nights, I was explaining Turtle.
Now, okay, so here's something that I'm not familiar with. You mentioned the Great Old Ones. The Great Old Ones are directly out of 5th edition. Having not played 5th edition, I don't know anything about them. I don't know what world they fit in, or who they are, or what's going on.
There's a hint that it's Cthulhu-like, but it's really deliberately vague, so the DMs can make it any kind of god thing they want. I can go get the book if you want me to give you some of the information from the 5th ed on the old ones.
That would be fun.
I'll be right back.
Go, Turtle.
There's the copyright material broadcast to the world.
Shh. Don't tell anybody. It'll be fine. Y'all didn't hear that, right?
Eldritch Blast won't be subject to any kind of sneak attack. You can't add sneak attack damage to an Eldritch Blast.
I'm back.
Wait, what? You can add sneak attack?
You can't sneak attack as a warlock if you're using Eldritch Blast.
Well, that makes me sad,
Apparently.
but not surprised. Wishful thinking. That'll never happen.
And weapon effects won't be applied through the Eldritch Blast either, but spell effects will be applied. Apparently. Don't know. Interesting.
Should I just read these two descriptive paragraphs?
Yeah, that would be interesting. I would like that very much.
The Great Old One. Your patron is a mysterious entity whose nature is utterly foreign to the fabric of reality. It might come from the far realm, the space beyond reality, or it could be one of the elder gods known only in legends. Its motives are incomprehensible to mortals, and its knowledge is so immense and ancient that even the greatest libraries pale in comparison to the vast secrets it holds. The Great Old One might be unaware of your existence or entirely indifferent to you, but the secrets you have learned allow it to draw your magic from it. Entities of this type include Gonadar, called That Which Lurks, Tharizdun, the Chain God, Dendar, the Night Serpent, Zargon the Returner, Great Cthulhu, and other unfathomable beings. And that's the descriptive text on that particular pact.
Very interesting.
I think it's one of the strengths of 5th editions that they do always leave it open for the DMs.
Yeah. Oh. I think that's very interesting. I mean, it certainly gives. Yeah, it's ultimately that it begs the question how you made the pact with the Great Old One in the first place, given that he may be indifferent or unknowing of your actual existence. Anyway.
And then the spells it gives you are kind of mind stuff. Like you'll give you Dissonant Whispers, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Detect Thoughts, Phantasmal Force, Clairvoyance, Sending, Dominate Beast, Evard's Black Tentacles, Dominate Person, and Telekinesis.
Now, I always find it interesting how they adapt particular spells, like deities and things into DDO, because there are a lot of spells that won't work in the game. Like sending, for example. Telekinesis, probably. So that, I mean, it's interesting how they will integrate some of these elements, or what they'll choose instead if they have to pick something that they can't do.
Only one where most of the spell list is actually in DDO is the Fiend. Because a lot of the Archfey ones, it's like Plant Growth, Blink, Calm Emotions, Phantasmal Force, Fairy Fire, Sleep, Dominate Beast, Greater Invisibility, Dominate Person, and Seeming. So that's missing a lot too, but most of the fiends are in here. It's like fire stuff: Burning Hands, Command, Scorching Ray, Fireball, Stink Cloud, Fire Shield, Wall of Fire, Flame Strike.
Yeah, so a lot of that integrates interestingly. And then there's just for the most part, I guess, some of them, I mean, some things are easier to integrate than others, obviously. And how they do it is always of interest.
I hope they're going to put some of the invocations into the enhancements.
To see someone asked the question if there would be a celestial pact that imbues something with a light or good damage, but they said obviously they've picked 3 pacts and they're not going to do any more for the time being. But I think a celestial pact would be interesting. Particularly, it would be interesting to see more people multi-class with a divine class being the splash class rather than divine class being the base, and adding a splash of something else.
And not for nothing, but there's only 3 in the 5th ed book too, and they're the same 3.
So
I imagine something might have to do with licensing.
Yeah, maybe.
But there's a lot of stuff that you can take in the invocations that I hope show up in the enhancements. Like Agonizing Blast adds your Charisma modifier to the damage Eldritch Blast deals. Respelling Blast, when you hit a creature with it, you can push the creature 10 feet away from you. There's a bunch of stuff that you can enhance your Eldritch Blast with. One of them ups the range. I'm playing a Warlock in the next campaign, so I've had a chance to look at a little of this. And I did sort of sell her soul to the Great Old Ones because I wanted that spell list. She's the one who will suffer, not me.
Here's an interesting comment. Howl of Terror will, of course, not require being in wolf form if you're a warlock. That's funny. And how much do you want to bet that they'll break it so that it doesn't require you being in wolf form for druid either? Whoops. That's me just being a little bit cynical, but of course we have somebody already for that. Um,
Is there
how
anything else you wanted to
I
know about the
wonder.
class?
Well, no, I mean, I have we, I have a rough idea. I wonder if anyone's thought of any interesting cross-class options for Warlock.
They lowered the hit dice in DDO. In the book, it's D8.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I wonder why. Is it different in different editions?
It might be, I hated 4th edition, so I didn't buy it. I can't cross-reference.
They have said that basically the version of Warlock we are getting is going to be a bit of a mashup of various different editions.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. That's basically what the whole game is. It's a mashup of different editions, different worlds, even. Yeah. So yeah, back to my other question. Does anybody have any? I mean, I don't know if we're not terribly experienced with warlocks as a group of people, but is there any interesting cross classes that you could envisage being? I mean, crossed with arcanes, perhaps, but I don't know.
It
I
would
think we're
give
going to have to
arcanes
see
an
the full
endless
trees
attack.
before we can actually really make that decision.
Yeah, it's a future thing, I guess. I mean,
Depending on how good the blast is, that would give wizards a manaless attack.
well, yes, if indeed that's what it is, absolutely. I wonder if I mean, I had wondered if it was going to be based on if there's going to be some other measure of that basic attack, but it is just a basic attack, so it's interesting. Well, all of this being said, I've pretty much exhausted the Warlock content, and we are almost upon our usual finish time. So I'm going to draw the stream to a close. And thank you everyone for chatting today while the servers have been down for most of the time that we normally play. I think we've covered a lot of interesting material. And thanks to
Sorry,
everyone.
people, for that awful reading.
It's fine. It was very interesting, and I think thanks everyone in the chat for joining us as well and being actively in discussion. And we've had lots of people in the chat, which has been really great. I look forward to seeing you sometime for some shows in the future, because we broadcast every Monday. Normally it's gameplay, but when the servers are down, we make stuff up. We talk for no reason.
Don't tell that.
All right,
you know
then.
everything.
Yeah, in Dungeons and Dragons, imagination is praised, so it's okay that we make it up.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good night everyone, and happy questing and all that. Now that the servers are back up.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.